They say millionaire, but at exactly 7:12 a.m., inside a glass penthouse overlooking Manhattan, one thing money couldn't buy was silence. The baby was screaming. 6-month-old Carter Walsh read. The nanny was nowhere to be found. The white noise. And standing in the middle of the storm was a black woman in a crisp navy uniform, holding a mop in one. Her name was Tasha Reynolds, 34, calm, sharp-eyed, and tall. She was there to clean, not to care, not to comfort, definitely not to intervene. But that cry? It wasn't the hungry kind, not the sleepy kind. It was the cry of a baby who felt abandoned, unseen, unheard. Tasha hesitated, just for a moment. Then she moved, through the silent hallway, past the towering windows, into the nursery, and there, in a $3,000 crib surrounded by designer baby blankets, lay Carter. Diaper-soaked, cheeks blotchy, arms reaching up into air that never held him back. Without thinking, Tasha picked him up, and just like that, the crying stopped. A blink, a breath, peace. She exhaled softly, holding him close, whispering something only a baby could understand. But then, the door burst open. A tall man in a navy blue suit stepped in, jaw clenched, finger already pointed. His voice cut the room in half. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" That was Griffin Walsh, tech CEO, self-made, and Carter's father. He looked at Tasha like she had just set fire to his empire. "You touched my son without permission." And in that moment, everything changed. Because Tasha wasn't just holding the baby, she was holding the truth. And soon, the truth was going to burn louder than any scream ever could. Griffin Walsh didn't grow up rich. He earned every dollar the hard way, coding in dark dorm rooms, sleeping under his desk during 18-hour startup grinds, eating ramen until the IPO hit. Now, at 37, he lived on the 58th floor of one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings, a glass fortress in the sky, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed a life he'd built brick by digital brick. Every surface gleamed, every square inch whispered luxury. A state-of-the-art espresso bar, an AI-controlled climate system, a walk-in closet bigger than most apartments in Queens. But what it didn't have was warmth. Not anymore. His wife Madison passed away during childbirth, an embolism, sudden, unforgiving. She was gone before Carter ever opened his eyes. And Griffin, he never fully came back from that hospital hallway. He threw himself into work, running Syncrobyte, his billion-dollar tech firm. He hired the best doctors, the best therapists, the best nannies, but Carter still cried. Every night, every nap, every silence. The baby didn't need money. He needed a mother, or at least someone who would hold him like one. That's where Tasha Reynolds entered the picture. Originally from Newark, New Jersey, Tasha didn't look like she belonged in a penthouse. She didn't sound like it either. Raised by her grandmother, she was the oldest of 4 siblings, used to fighting for the last bite of dinner and the first slice of opportunity. She once dreamed of becoming a child psychologist, had even completed 2 years at Rutgers, until her mother got sick. Bills piled up. Dreams paused. She took whatever job kept the lights on. Now she worked with Prestige Home Services, an agency that sent vetted staff to high-profile residences. On paper, she was just cleaning crew. No contact with the children, no exceptions. But Tasha had a gift, a calm energy, the kind babies instinctively trusted, the kind Madison might have had. That morning, when Griffin walked in and saw Tasha holding Carter, something ancient stirred in him. Fear, control, loss. He wasn't angry just because she crossed a line. He was angry because she succeeded where he failed. She got the baby to stop crying. And worse, Carter leaned into her shoulder, tiny fingers clutching her sleeve, like it was the only safe place he'd ever known. Griffin didn't see compassion. He saw intrusion. He didn't ask questions. He made accusations. Because men like Griffin, powerful, isolated, don't react to emotion. They react to control slipping, and right now, this woman, this maid, was holding the one thing in his life that he couldn't manage, couldn't fix, couldn't decode. His son. And somehow, she held him like she understood everything he needed. But Tasha? She wasn't trying to make a statement. She was just doing what felt right. She didn't want his house or his wealth. She just didn't want to hear a baby cry without doing something. But in this world, doing the right thing can feel like the worst crime. And in that apartment, with judgment hanging thick in the air, one truth became clear. This wasn't just about a baby anymore. It was about class and race and wounds no one wanted to admit were still bleeding. And that's when the story truly began. "You touched my son without permission." Griffin's voice sliced through the nursery like a blade, sharp and unmistakable. Tasha froze, arms still gently cradling Carter, who was finally resting peacefully against her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off again. "I want you out. Right now." Carter stirred at the harsh tone, his little fingers curling tighter into the fabric of her shirt. He didn't cry. Not yet. But the tremble in his lips said enough. Tasha took a calming breath and slowly moved to place Carter back into the crib. Gently, carefully, with love. But Griffin didn't see that. He didn't see the tenderness or the instinct. He only saw disobedience. "You don't get to decide what's best for my son," he snapped. "You're here to clean floors, not play mother." The words stung, but Tasha didn't flinch. "I wasn't trying to—" "Save it," he barked, pulling out his phone. "You're done here." He began filming her, right there, in the nursery. One hand recording, the other waving at her like she was trash being taken out. "This is Tasha Reynolds, employee of Prestige Home Services, caught on camera touching my son without consent," he said coldly. "This will be going to your agency and the authorities." Her face didn't change, but inside, her heart cracked, not just for herself, but for the baby, who was now looking at his father with wide, confused eyes, as if asking, "Why are you yelling at the person who held me when you didn't?" Griffin didn't stop there. He followed her down the hallway with the camera still rolling, out of the nursery, past the chef, past the assistant who turned away. No one said a word. When they reached the elevator, he threw open the door. "Leave your badge," he said, "and don't ever show your face here again." Tasha placed the ID badge on the marble console, eyes steady. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She just looked at him. And in that glance, there was no anger, no fear, just disappointment. That unnerved him more than anything else. As the elevator doors closed, Griffin turned back into his high-rise silence, content with what he thought was swift justice. But Carter? He started crying again. Louder this time, shrill, unrelenting, like grief had returned the moment she left. The sound echoed through the penthouse, through Griffin's designer walls and noise-canceling windows. And for the first time, in a long time. Griffin felt helpless. Downstairs, Tasha stood on the sidewalk, blinking against the morning sun. A few bystanders looked her way, confused by the tear-streaked baby cries still echoing faintly from above. She could feel the burn of injustice in her chest. Not because she lost a job, not because she'd been humiliated, but because this had happened before. Different buildings, different babies, same assumptions. She pulled out her phone and texted just one person. "Ava, I need to talk." It's happening again. Ava Reynolds, her younger sister, wasn't just a law student anymore. She was weeks away from passing the bar, and she never forgot what had happened to their cousin Isaiah, or how the system didn't care until someone made it impossible to ignore. Tasha didn't cry, didn't rant. She just stood still for a moment, listening to the wind between the skyscrapers. She wasn't going to let this disappear quietly, because now it wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was about how quickly some people assume guilt, how fast they reach for a camera, how easily they choose shame over truth. And upstairs, Griffin Walsh had no idea that by filming her in that moment, he'd just handed her all the proof she needed. The video Griffin posted was just 47 seconds long. It showed Tasha holding Carter for no more than a few heartbeats, followed by his voice barking accusations and a shaky camera trailing her out of the apartment. No context, no explanation, no compassion. He uploaded it to a private network used by elite parents to warn others of untrustworthy staff. Within an hour, it had been shared over 70 times. By noon, Prestige Home Services had suspended Tasha indefinitely. By 3 p.m., Carter had cried himself hoarse and refused to eat. Griffin didn't notice. He was too busy fielding texts from board members who were concerned about optics, not because of what he'd done, but because someone had leaked a second clip. Not his clip. Tasha's. You see, as she exited the building that morning, Tasha had instinctively turned on her phone and begun recording. Not to protect herself, but because in this world, truth needs a receipt. And her clip? It captured something his didn't. The baby, quieting in her arms. The gentle way she whispered to him. The pain in her eyes when Griffin yelled. The restraint she showed when publicly humiliated. It was raw. It was human. And it hit different. She hadn't posted it herself. Ava did. The caption was simple. Black woman fired for comforting a crying baby. No criminal record, no warning, just gone. And unlike Griffin's curated clip, this one went viral. It didn't take long before social media caught fire. Justice for Tasha, let her hold him, Bach, this is why, they cry. Thousands of women, mothers, doulas, nannies, even pediatricians, began commenting, that baby trusted her. This is what emotional intelligence looks like. She didn't just hold him, she saw him. Meanwhile, Griffin found himself in unfamiliar territory. People weren't applauding his decisiveness. They were questioning his empathy. Was this how he ran his company? Was this how he treated those beneath his tax bracket? Investors began whispering. Reporters began digging. And somewhere in a quiet apartment in Queens, Tasha sat on the couch next to Ava, holding a warm mug of tea and wondering what came next. She hadn't wanted attention. She wanted dignity. She wanted to work in a world where doing the right thing didn't cost you everything. That night, Carter cried again. The new nanny, his 5th one this year, tried music, toys, bottles. Nothing worked. Griffin stood outside the nursery door, phone in hand, eyes staring blankly at the baby monitor screen. He didn't post anything this time. He didn't record. He just listened to the cries, to the emptiness, to the sound of a tiny soul reaching for someone who wasn't coming back. And in that silence, for the first time, Griffin began to question his version of the story. By day 3, the story had reached morning television. Tasha's clip had amassed over 4.2 million views, and the hashtag "Let Her Hold Him" had begun trending on both coasts. News anchors discussed it between traffic reports and weather updates, with headlines like, "Tech CEO under fire for firing maid who comforted his son." Was it about protocol or prejudice? The viral video that's challenging power dynamics in America's living rooms. But the real twist? It didn't come from the media. It came from the pediatrician. Dr. Lyle Simmons had been Carter's physician since birth. Quiet, conservative, and professional to a fault. He rarely got involved in public matters. But this time, he couldn't stay silent. He released a statement on his clinic's official letterhead. Ms. Tasha Reynolds acted instinctively and appropriately in a moment of clear distress. Her response prevented what could have been a serious emotional escalation for the infant, who's been experiencing prolonged symptoms of attachment anxiety. I have, on multiple occasions, advised Mr. Walsh to increase direct nurturing care for Carter. If anything, Ms. Reynolds succeeded where others have failed, and Carter's reaction speaks louder than any headline. The internet exploded. Even those who had originally defended Griffin, arguing rules are rules, now began to shift. Because the narrative was no longer just about a baby and a maid. It was about evidence, it was about professional validation, and it was about a man who, when faced with compassion, chose control. Corporate sponsors began pulling out of Synchrobyte's partnerships. Griffin's own board issued an internal vote to suspend him from public relations duties, pending resolution of ongoing backlash. And then, the final blow landed. A former employee from Griffin's past, someone no one expected, stepped forward. Her name was Leah Cortez, a Latina woman who had worked in Griffin's San Francisco office 5 years earlier. She had been a junior UX designer, praised for her creativity, but quietly pushed out after what she called an emotionally retaliatory meeting over childcare leave. She didn't post a video. She posted screenshots, emails, memos, Slack threads, and among them was one chilling line from Griffin, typed late one night in a private channel. If people want empathy, they can find it in the HR brochure. I pay for performance, not feelings. That line went everywhere. Memes, tweets, TikToks, even billboards. And in a single viral moment, Griffin Walsh went from admired tech mogul to walking embodiment of corporate coldness. Back in Queens, Tasha watched it all unfold with quiet disbelief. Ava sat beside her, grinning like justice was finally taking breath. But Tasha didn't celebrate. She didn't want Griffin ruined. She didn't need revenge. She just wanted the truth to land. And it had. One call came that evening that no one expected. It was Griffin. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even defensive. It was human. "I don't know what to say," he said. Tasha paused before answering. "Then maybe don't say anything. Maybe just listen." And for the first time in a long time, he did. Because sometimes, the twist in a story isn't about shocking events. It's about finally hearing the truth you spent years avoiding. And for Griffin Walsh, that truth wasn't that he'd made a mistake. It was that someone else had shown his son more love in 5 minutes than he had in 5 months. The elevator in Synchrobyte's corporate headquarters hadn't stopped on the 42nd floor in over a week. That's where Griffin Walsh's office was. His nameplate had been removed quietly one morning. The press release said he had stepped back to reflect and focus on personal matters. But everyone inside the building, and now the world, knew the truth. He wasn't just the CEO who fired a maid. He was the father who didn't know his own son. And now, America had seen it. As the backlash swelled, Synchrobyte's stocks took a dive. Not catastrophic, but loud enough for headlines. Employees leaked internal memos. Former interns came forward. Even board members gave quiet interviews to trusted journalists. And in each story, the same thread appeared. Griffin Walsh led with control, not care. Authority, not empathy. The clip of Tasha gently rocking Carter, contrasted with Griffin's shouting, was now in university classrooms, DEI trainings, and HR workshops. Professors used it to talk about unconscious bias. Counselors used it to talk about trauma in infants. Social justice advocates used it to talk about dignity. Meanwhile, Tasha was offered talk shows, podcasts, even sponsorships. She declined all of them. Instead, she joined Ava in launching the Holding Space Project, a small nonprofit dedicated to emotional literacy for caregivers, especially Black and brown women in domestic roles. Their first event, a quiet seminar in Harlem, was booked out in 36 hours. Reporters showed up, not for a headline, but to listen. Because this wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a mirror. Parents began questioning their own responses to help. Corporations revised internal policies on support staff, and thousands of women who had been silenced for overstepping in roles they were paid to disappear into finally had a voice. As for Griffin, he stayed silent for nearly a month, until one morning he appeared at Tasha and Ava's seminar, unannounced, unguarded. No press, no cameras. Just a tired man holding a tiny bag with a toy inside. Carter's favorite stuffed dinosaur. Tasha met him at the door. For a long second, they just stood there. "He doesn't sleep without this anymore," Griffin said softly. "And he still reaches for your voice at night." Tasha didn't reply right away. She took the toy and nodded. "Then don't let him grow up learning to ignore that voice." Griffin swallowed hard. "Is it too late?" Tasha's answer came not in words, but in action. She stepped aside and let him in. That day, he sat in the back row, listened to women speak about respect, about emotional labor, about the cost of being strong in silence. He didn't interrupt. He didn't explain. He just received. And sometimes that's how reckoning happens. Not with a crash, but with stillness. Not in trending hashtags, but in eye contact. Poetic justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just one man realizing that power without presence is hollow. Sometimes it's a baby's cry echoing through a marble penthouse and never being heard. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's the woman who was told to mop the floor, who ends up cleaning the soul of the room. Some stories end with applause. Others end with silence. This one ends with understanding. Not the kind you announce in press conferences, but the kind that settles in your chest long after the video fades. Because what happened between Griffin Walsh and Tasha Reynolds wasn't just about a baby who wouldn't stop crying. It was about all the times people are told not to reach out. All the moments when rules silence compassion. All the lives we overlook simply because they wear the wrong name tag or carry the wrong accent. Tasha wasn't a nanny. She wasn't a therapist. She wasn't qualified by corporate standards to soothe that child. But you know what she was? Human. And sometimes being human is the only qualification that matters. In that penthouse with marble floors and panoramic views of Manhattan, it wasn't money that calmed the storm. It was presence, gentleness, instinct. We live in a world where credentials often matter more than connection, where people in uniforms are told to stay invisible, stay silent, stay in line. But this story? This one reminds us that care doesn't have a job description. It shows us that power isn't always found in corner offices or stock options. Sometimes it lives in the hands of someone who simply chooses to care. So the next time you see someone step out of line to do what's right, pause before you judge. Ask why they did it. Ask who they were trying to help. And more importantly, ask yourself if you would have had the courage to do the same. Because in the end, justice isn't just about headlines. It's about humanity. And humanity is built not by those who hold titles, but by those who hold others when no one else will. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Who in your life needed to be held, but wasn't? And who can you show up for today, not as a boss or a title, but as a human? Let this story live beyond the screen. Act with empathy, lead with heart, speak with truth. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the quietest voices hold the loudest power. Have you ever seen someone do the right thing but get punished for it just because of who they were or where they came from? What would you have done in Griffin's shoes or Tasha's? Let's talk about empathy, power, and who gets to be heard.